These are trying times. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires. So many things are impacting us on the farm and across our countries. We want you to know that we at the Rural Well are here to listen. And please reach out for help to us and to other professionals when you need it most through all of that is going on. We also know that we all have frightening farm safety mishap stories. What can we do today to take more care? That's what we're going to talk about. Hello, and welcome to the Rural Well. We are Bridget and Loren, and we are thrilled to have you with us. Today, we're going to talk about farm safety and what we can be doing differently or better to be safe. And thanks for joining us. Maybe you are picking rocks, putting in your online grocery order, or washing windows. We know that the ag industry has its challenges, but we are right alongside you, and we cannot wait to connect and inspire one generation and legacy to the next. Let's get started. Folks, thanks for joining us again today. And as usual, what are we going to talk about, Loren?
Bridget? Okay, so despite the fact that we were just talking about numerous marriage proposals and old lady flab and all sorts of goodness, and folks, I hope that gets cut and pasted into one of our recordings at some point because Bridget was roaring. She was really laughing. But we're going to talk about farm safety in the back 40.
Okay. When I think of farm safety, the first thing that comes to mind is don't wear loose clothing around PTOs, keep your hands and legs out of augers. But I think it's more than that. Mm-hmm. You made a statement just a little while ago. We are predisposed to accidents due to stress. Tell me more about that.
You know, it's one of the less talked about factors when it comes to farm safety, although that's changing. The National Farmers Mental Health Alliance, and our website, by the way, is www.nfmha.ca. And we just participated in a farm safety event along with Family Counseling Center here in Sarnia-Lambton. And so they recognize mental health as an issue in farm safety, and it really is. In fact, Ag with Emma, I'm not sure if you follow Ag with Emma. Oh, I see.
Emma and I are friends. In fact, I just texted her on Monday.
Oh my gosh. I really like Emma. Yeah. And I probably am one of those secret super fans and she has no idea. But anyway, I watch all of her stuff and I've used some of it in some of our presentations. And she talks about, she did a video about, don't just pray for a farmer or don't just thank a farmer, pray for a farmer, I think is what the end note says. I can't quite remember, so my apologies. But in it, she shows a clip of the stress around farmers and fatalities and dangers on the farm. And what we know from research is when our mental health acuity or our ability to really focus and pay attention is off, we're more likely to exhibit an accident or be experience an on-farm accident. And that happens when we're stressed. When we're stressed, we're fatigued, right? We're tired. We feel overwhelmed. We're less likely to care. In fact, we actually use this oftentimes when we're talking about weight loss. And people start to have one chip and they're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I have to give up. I had that one thing that
so I'm just going to have the
threw my
bag.
day off track. Yeah.
I'm just going to have the whole bag. And we actually do that as farmers all the time, right? Where it's like, oh, well, I turned the PTO off once today. I'm just whatever. We're not thinking because we feel overwhelmed or we feel so stressed. We're not thinking through the full context or our danger mechanism kind of gets shut down. The other piece of it for farmers is, as I mentioned earlier, is we're more inclined to exhibit ADHD symptoms. Whether or not you're diagnosed with ADHD, whether you believe it's an actual diagnosis, we're going to set that all aside because we could be here all day talking about that. I'm really kind of fascinated by it. But ADHD means we're more likely to be risk takers, and we're more likely to jump from one thing to another. And so if we're predisposed to it through ADHD like behaviors where we get sidetracked easily, and then we're really tired and we're stressed, and so we feel overwhelmed and exhausted, we're really kind of setting ourselves up for dangerous interactions on the farm.
Okay. Gosh, I have so many notes again. People are going to wonder why I'm running through mega notepads every time we talk as I keep writing things down. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about when you were saying that is, do you think that the ADHD incidence is the rate of that is higher in those of us who farm, like you said, higher risk takers, etc.? And do you think that accidents are seasonal, that we have more farm accidents because, say, harvest is long and drawn out and we're paying less attention and we're just a little more careless at that point in time under a little more stress?
So yes, and yes to both. So when we're talking about ADHD, and your question was, of course, are we more at risk for injury during harvest and spring seasons? Basically, right? Planting, seeding. So the answer is yes, we are. We are more exhausted. We're under a great deal of stress. Fatigue sets in, and it clouds our ability to really stay with a great deal of fortitude. It's one of the reasons why you'll hear some age-old farmers who say, no, I have to get so many hours of rest a night. And if my crop stays on there are some people who prioritize that to that extent. And then I know there's others who work 20 hours a day and they sleep in their cab for a couple hours and they get up and go again and they sleep in their, I know people do it. So I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. I'm just saying that certainly there's a greater risk during those seasons. Your other question was the linkage to ADHD, and I can't help but kind of sit here for a minute. ADHD, as we know, has become more and more increasingly diagnosed, I would say, in our communities. Does it mean that it has increasingly become, are there actually increased numbers of people with ADHD? Or is it that we're diagnosing and labeling more effectively or more efficiently? I don't know the answer to that. I would probably say that the incidences have increased. And one of the reasons why it's increased, though, and you have to keep this in mind, is ADHD and trauma or PTSD look very similar. So the behaviors that we see in ADHD are almost identical to the behaviors we see in post-traumatic stress disorder. And for kids, it doesn't mean that they've been serving in a war, which is what a traditional PTSD diagnosis is, right? And to all those veterans who are listening, thank you. Thank you for your service. But for children who grow up under chronic stress, their brains behave the same way it does for our veterans who have served in war. And so I'm not trying to generalize this too much, but when kids grow up in environments where there's a lot of stress, their brains are impacted by it. Or where there's been a form of neglect, their brains are impacted by it. And so what we see in our agriculture sector is we have more expression of the DRD4 gene, which is the ADHD gene, so to speak, in our DNA. It is genetic. It's not all bad. In fact, I as I learn more and more about it, I'm like, I think I could probably check the box just fine, because you too, Bridget. Yeah.
Oh, right here. I am pretty sure, and I've said this, I think I might be undiagnosed ADHD, but it's not a bad thing because the fact that you and I move like the Energizer bunnies just allows us to get more done in a day.
Well, it does. It allows us to multitask, right? It allows us, and we're curious about a number of different things. And so some people would liken that to the hunter versus farmer mentality. And 99% of our history, some would argue, is kind of that hunter mentality where we're always on the lookout. We were always looking for danger because we were trying to survive in that age old. And, of course, all sorts of disagreements with that. Whereas farmers are more, they would till the ground in their local area. And so that's the definition of between hunter and farmer. But really current day farmers would be more like hunters. We're always on the lookout for danger. We're always watching the weather. We're You know what I mean? We're always primed and ready to combat whatever threat comes our way, even if it's, and I hate to say it, but if we have an animal rights activism protest at the end of our driveway, we are primed and ready for that challenge. And so it's not a bad thing. And I think, unfortunately, the way that our society has gravitated when it comes to our education system, and I know the education system in the US is somewhat different than Canada, but I think we face some of the same things. Those environments are really not as conducive to those with ADHD than don't.
No, because if you think about what it was like to be in elementary school as a kid, my ants in my pants, as the teacher would say, "Can't you sit still?" was probably the way I was displaying that I couldn't. I had all this energy. And when Grandma would tell you to go out and run around the house a couple times to burn off some energy, she meant it.
And it worked.
Just get out of here for a bit. And when we referencing back to kids, one of the things that we have recently started here in North Dakota, we just completed its second year, is a farm safety camp for kids. And it goes back to don't get into a grain bin. Be aware of entrapments. Again, keep those hands and feet out of augers. Tractor driving, safely hooking up implements as well as hydraulic hoses.
Yep.
Four-wheelers, UTV, licensing, driver safety. But here's one that they've added: stress for kids and how to help them avoid the stress and just have good mental health days. So we are getting so much better at this in both countries to help people improve for themselves.
I agree, but the unfortunate thing is it's come at a cost, because the statistics, and in Canada, our rural kids are 4 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than urban kids.
Wow.
4 to 6 times. That's a lot.
That's a huge
number. And so our rural kids have paid a price when it comes to their mental health and wellness. And so when we talk about on-farm safety, we must include discussion about our mental wellness because it's a huge risk factor.
Okay, let me ask how some of these things relate. So when I think about that stress, that was particularly in the situation with kids, loneliness, how much of that is a compounding factor, a stress factor for kids, do you think, that adds to that depression, anxiety, and suicide rate?
It's hard to gauge. One of the things that the research has cited is they don't have access to the same kind of drop-in programs that some of our urban kids would find support at. So that's true. Think of this family that I've worked with recently, or I know, and their family is, quite frankly, huge, and they have all sorts of kids, and those best friends are their cousins, and they have a really strong sense of capital. What we call capital is like your ability to invest and to sustain hardship because you've got connections. There's 3 different forms of social capital: bonding, bridging, and linking social capital. And I won't go into the details, but the bonding social capital is what's really immediate to you.
Okay.
And so our rural families in general, and I'm speaking in generality because there's exceptions to every rule, we have a high degree of social capital, bonding social capital. So that helps to compensate for it. The difficulty is rural kids are facing some real hard situations. Yeah. When you look at going into agriculture and if you're not getting a farm handed to you, the investment, the capital investment in going into agriculture is astronomical and it's unachievable. The other piece that we have when you talk about loneliness is there is a group of people who are lonely within big families or rural communities. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate. One of the things I find most common, and I don't say this to any of the parents listening for any purposes of guilt, because I am a mom. I'm a mom of 3 chosen and 3 biological, and I am so delighted in every one of my kids. I cannot tell you, but it doesn't mean that I didn't make mistakes as a mom, right? It doesn't mean that I didn't, do or say things that contributed to this sense of no matter how hard I try, I just never quite measure up. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the most damaging messages our rural kids are hearing. No matter how hard I try, I just never quite satisfy. I just never quite make that mark. It's not ever just quite good enough. And that's a message we have to change for our rural kids.
And I feel that really comes down through the generations.
It does. Mm-hmm.
Because once again, you can't feel bad, just do better.
Right. That's right.
Too many times we were taught that. On this subject of loneliness, I got this quote just this morning, and it's from Charles Buckowski, and that's who it's attributed to. And it says, when nobody wakes you up in the morning, and when nobody waits for you at night, and when you can do whatever you want, do you call it freedom or loneliness? I know that there's an awful lot of single farmers out there. And I actually posted it on social media this morning. And many of the reactions were, I feel this. I live in the place that I want to. I have the job or the career that I want, but nobody else wants to be a part of that. The location, the job, etc. That's got to be a big stressor and an implication on farm safety too.
It's tremendously huge. And, when we talk about people who have been married and that process of divorce on the farm is really complicated. It's just brutal. And we don't have time to go into it here. But I think about this one older gentleman that I knew that quite frankly was lonely and had a beautiful farm, had a working farm, had friends, had all of those pieces, but just didn't have anybody to really share intimately with. And you see, when we don't have those relationships where we can become vulnerable with another person, then we lack intimacy. But interesting enough, when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy, which is what we need to thrive as humans, right? One of the very core essences of that is love and belonging. And I really believe people can experience love without experiencing a sense of belonging. That's why they're labeled too differently. We think they're the same, but they're not. You can have people who love you in your life, and yet you don't feel like you have that intimacy of belonging. And so a challenge to rural communities is, how do we create that atmosphere where there's value in every experience? Our world is lacking it. I often say to people, has anyone ever told you that you have value? You have inherent value. It's not based on what you do. It's based on the fact that you're breathing and you're alive, and therefore you have value.
Yeah.
All too often people say, no, I've never heard that. And so therefore, that's part of our mandate, Bridget, for you and I to be able to say to people, no, you play an incredible role in our ag community. You have value, and we are better for it because you're here. We have to create communities that are brave enough to share that message.
Oh, we do. We absolutely do. And I have had farmers respond by saying, but I can't show my vulnerability because someone will try to rent away my land or give me a black mark by my name publicly. But it begins with changing the community, just what you said. That's tremendous. I have a question in regards to discussion about loneliness. And we know that when you're lonely, you're stressed, you're not thinking as clearly. That can lead to farm accidents. Does that also become a situation where you turn much more inwardly? And can that lead to some increased instances of dementia where accidents happen because of that onset? Do you think that's a correlation we can draw, or am I stretching too far?
No, I don't think you're stretching too far. I think we have to understand the larger atmosphere and larger context. And dementia is actually, not dementia, but Alzeimers is something they're actually calling diabetes 3, linking it to stress, right? Mm-hmm. And that fallout, which I would argue is actually cortisol, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone that's released when we're under stress. And it's long lasting in our bodies. And so it can lead to things. But the other indication of that is trauma at a young age, right? Trauma contributes to early onset dementia.
Wow.
And so I think we have to have the lens where we step back from the situation. We really have to understand there's multiple factors that come into place there. And I don't know if I'm qualified to speak to it, but I think what we can say is when we're lonely, we experience more stress. The other thing is when we're lonely, we're more likely to experience feelings of depression and anxiety. Will I always be lonely? We actually worry about our loneliness. And that can lead to incidences where on-farm accidents are labeled as accidents, but they're not. And it's an absolute travesty when we lose farmers to suicide.
Yes.
But as farmers, we have access to large equipment and we have the means. And statistically speaking, rural men are more likely to utilize those in order to complete suicide. And so does loneliness play a role in that? Absolutely. Absolutely. Loneliness plays a role in that. And in fact, there's recent research that says that our number one issue in the United States and therefore in Canada is an epidemic of loneliness, like an epidemic of loneliness. Loneliness is our battleground right now.
That should be a t-shirt. Loneliness is our battleground.
Wow.
Because it is.
So how do we stop that? Like, what do you think? But what comes to mind for you, Bridget? How do we combat loneliness? And how does that loneliness impact our farm safety strategies?
I think in a number of ways. How do we combat that loneliness? We can put on as many community events as we want, but if someone doesn't make the decision to attend, you won't affect them in a positive manner. Okay. You can't drag a horse to water and force him to drink. But what you can do is gently invite and guide and especially reach out, because I think it comes down to more individualism. It can't be just, I hung a poster at the convenience store or at Tim Hortons, so you all know you can come to this community dinner and we're going to do something together and we're going to feel that sense of community. It has to be an individual reach out. And then the unfortunate part is so often I don't want to get involved. I'm already doing too many things. There are so many emotions that surround loneliness for the person who has it and for those who, whether or not they have the power to help reduce it.
No, because I don't think there is an easy answer, but what came to mind as you were speaking was the word intentionality.
Oh,
and
yes.
I think as a farmer, what would happen if you chose 3 people? In fact, I was working with a farmer not long ago, and this farmer is one of those uber wise farmers, hugely successful. And I said to him, in your realm of influence, how many people are you pouring into? And the list was, quite frankly, far too long. There are so many people that could just kind of take a snippet from this person's life, right? And I said, I want you to choose 3. My challenge to you is to, aside from your individual family, like, because your family is who you pour in, you've got to be intentional with your marital or partnership relationships and your children. We have got to be intentional about those relationships. There's an old quote, I think it's by Dr. Gordon Neufeld. I could be wrong. It says that without relationship, we have no influence. So long as we have relationship, we have influence. We want to have influence. That's not a bad thing. And so we need to have relationship in order to do that. And my challenge to that farmer was choose 3 people. Just choose 3. And so my challenge to our listeners is choose 3 people that you can regularly check in on, that you can at certain times of the year send a note maybe, or mentor or whatever that looks like, but choose your 3 people with intentionality. I'm not saying that we're going to cover everybody, but if as farmers we did that collectively, there'd be a lot less loneliness. There'd be a lot more relationship building. And we are relational people. If COVID didn't teach us anything, it taught us that we are relational people. And
that is exactly right.
We have to spend time in relationship. I totally agree. Yeah.
We can't leave this topic of farm safety and just what you were saying about accidents that aren't really accidents, because some of it is by loneliness. Certainly it's because as farmers and ranchers, we have the means and access to those dangerous situations, but also it is not an insurance policy. And unfortunately, I know of accidents that were not accidents because the farmer felt that that was the way to finance or clear finances of what was going on the farm. And so my message would be also to those who are listening, who are bankers and loan officers and lenders and those who may have anything to do with economy and dollars and cents, watch for those signs of stress in your customers, because the unfortunate situation is some of them may so choose to cash in their insurance policy to fix a financial problem. And we simply can't lose other people. We just need them here. We don't want that to be the case.
It's a real reality. So listeners, now is our opportunity to shift gears again. And a quick little shout out to the Shifting Gears work that is done by Three Oaks Cabin in Florence with their fundraiser there. But we're going to shift gears and play a little bit of a game called Catch a Phrase. I guess it's not a game, but I always think of it as a game. So we're going to share a quote with you. And I'm going to ask Bridget, what do you think of this quote? We're going to chat about this quote. And it's always intended to be inspiring, but maybe one of these days we'll have a comical one. So the secret of joy in work is contained in one word: excellence. To know how to do something well is to enjoy it, by Pearl S. Buck. The secret of joy in work is contained in one word: excellence. To know how to do something well is to enjoy it.
I think when you listen to that phrase, it doesn't just have to be about work. What if? Remember how maybe you had a grandma, or I was very fortunate. I had 4 great grandparents until I was into high school. And I think about their excellence was in a German Russian proverb that I grew up with, where there is bread, there is home. And my great grandma's excellence was in making sure that they fed us. That was how, nobody said, I love you, but they fed us. And that was their language of love. That's where I think the excellence falls when it comes to your family.
That's a beautiful picture. And I think so true. I think the difficulty, I actually struggle with this quote because I feel like the word excellence is so subjective. And so many of us believe we're chasing excellence when we're really using anxiety to motivate us further. But I do want to tell, my husband and I have this cute little bunkie. It's this cute little bunkie, and it has a queen size bed in it, and it has a wood fireplace. It's 10 by 10, really, really tiny, but it has a little tiny called Cubic Mini. I'm giving a little shout out there to Cubic Mini. Hopefully they give us money. No, I'm just kidding. It has a Cubic Mini. It has a little heat cool pump, it's beautiful. I love the bunkie, but the bunkie doesn't have a bathroom. And I don't know if you've ever been crouched over a bonfire pit to do a little bit of a wee in the middle of the night, but it's not the most opportune thing. And so we decided to hire somebody to build us a little bathroom bunkie. 36 square feet, super tiny. And this fellow that we hired to do it, along with my husband who's building it, is like a mastercraft. It's beautiful work. And the attention to detail and all that he, and now I got to say, he's not exactly the fastest guy. I mean, if you want a bathroom bunkie built in a day, he can be fast, but he doesn't want to be fast. He wants to be good. And so I said to him the other day, I said, wow, his name's Luke. I said, wow, Luke, do you feel proud of your work? It's just so well done. And he said, yeah, I do. He said, I bet you feel proud of all the work that you do. And he said, well, that's the goal. His goal is excellence in his craft and refining his craft. I think about myself as a therapist. There's times where I've probably, flopped as a therapist. I don't think there's a lot, at least I hope not.
Right.
If any clients are listening, they can let me know. But I want to perfect my craft. I want to do well. I want to learn more. I want to show myself enough compassion that I'm willing to learn. And I think that's where the excellence comes from, but not out of a desire to learn, not out of a desire to punish myself. And I think there's a big difference between the two.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful goal. I really like that. Before we end today, we always like to go out with a little bit of humor. And I picked up my chat box and I found a great little question for us that we get to add that might add a little humor to our day. And I hope that as others listen, they think about this on their end too, and they would be welcome to send us messages and let us know what their answer to our question is. All right. If you could have 50 pounds of anything other than money, what would you want?
Oh my goodness, 50 pounds of anything other than money, which includes gold and metals.
Right. No currencies here.
No currencies at all. 50 pounds of, and I don't know. I could be really scholastic and very it'd be 50 pounds of grace, or, 50 pounds of, but that's not realistic. That's not accurate. So 50 pounds. 50 pounds. I have no idea. I can't think of anything. I don't know. Oh my goodness, Bridget. I'm totally squashing this moment right here.
No, you're okay.
What would you do? What would you do? 50 pounds of something.
I thought of 2 things, and this will show my personality style. I would take 50 pounds of books, which is probably 5.
I was just going to say, that's not a lot of books though.
but I love to read. So I would take 50 pounds of whatever you can give me to read. Or I really am a good eater. So I take 50 pounds of butter because I could bake, I could cook, I could do all sorts of things with good butter.
So I would go along with the butter or like cheese. I could really like some really good cheese, good quality cheese.
I'm with you.
And which is probably equivalent to gold, quite frankly, because it's so expensive, but really good quality cheese or olive oil. The price of olive oil right now is really high because to all of our friends from Italy, they've had some terrible weather and the price of olive oil has gone through the roof. Yes. I love using olive oil because we like to make our own pizzas and I like to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil.
Oh, and really good olive oil, I might add. Yes.
Yeah, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are, talk about stressors. They are withstanding some very long-term drought over there that is causing some big hassles. Yeah. And it's not just in their food production, it's their tourist industry. To tour the olive trees has really gone down. So,
which is, they were largely dependent on the income from the tourism, just as much as from the olive trees, I think. So,
side note on olive oil, we both like it. Well, to those who are thinking about what their favorite 50 pounds would be, I hope they drop us a message and let us know what that is, because we'd be thrilled to compare notes as to what we didn't even think of and what someone else did. So we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on The Rural Well. We will do this again soon.
Hey, folks, just a little follow-up to our session. If you are among those that are struggling, if you've thought of taking your own life, or if you've thought of harming yourself, we would invite you to call 988 or 911 and get the support you need, because you are worth it. Bridget and I both stand here and want you to know that we want you to be well. And so we would invite you, if you are in crisis, to reach out for some professional help through the services provided. Thanks so much, folks. We are so glad that you joined us on The Rural Well, and we hope that you found a nugget of wisdom in our chat today. But listening to our podcast is a drop in the bucket if you are struggling. So we encourage you to reach out in whatever way you are able to ensure that you get the help that you need to thrive. If at any time you are in crisis and cannot keep yourself safe or your loved one safe, please call 911 or visit your nearest hospital. We are delighted that you chose to spend your time with us, and we want to hear from you. So drop us a note and be sure to tune in next time to The Rural Well, and remember, you were made to thrive.